My name's Nova, I'm 21. And last month, during what was supposed to be a simple family meeting, my dad snapped. He hit me for refusing to serve my brother like I was his maid. That moment changed everything I thought I knew about family, love, and loyalty. I'll never forget the sound of that night. Where are you watching from? Drop your state in the comments and subscribe for more real stories about family, betrayal, and emotional courage. I still remember the way the house smelled that night, burnt casserole and cigarette smoke. My dad had been in one of his moods all day, pacing between the kitchen and the living room like something inside him was waiting to explode. It wasn't unusual, but there was something different about that evening. I just didn't know yet that it would become the night everything shifted for me. I was standing by the sink, rinsing dishes after dinner, when I heard him say it, the words that made my stomach twist. Family meeting. Now. Living room. He said it like it was an order, not a request. I dried my hands and looked over at my mom, who was already gathering her things. She didn't look at me. She never did when he was in that tone. My brother Matt was slouched on the couch, scrolling through his phone like royalty waiting for servants. Typical. I sat down on the edge of the couch, across from my father. He had that old recliner he always sat in, the one he called his throne. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, jaw tight. I could smell the faint mix of beer and anger before he even started talking. Bills are piling up, he said. We're all adults now, so everyone needs to do their part. I nodded slowly, thinking maybe this would be an actual discussion. But then his eyes landed on me. And that means you, Nova. You live here rent-free. You can at least help your brother out around the house. I blinked, confused. I already do, I said. I cook, I clean, He cut me off with a sharp motion. You've got too much attitude lately. You act like you're doing favors for everyone. You should be grateful you've got a roof over your head. Matt smirked, tossing his phone aside. Yeah, Nova. Maybe if you didn't quit college, Dad wouldn't be so disappointed. The word stung, but not as much as seeing Dad's proud grin at my brother's cheap jab. It was like watching the two of them share a language I'd never been allowed to speak. I wanted to stay calm. I really did. I'd been through this routine before. Their little team against me, but tonight, something inside me felt heavier. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe I'd just had enough. Dad leaned back. From now on, I want dinner ready by 7 every night. You'll make Matt's plate and serve it before your own. You're home all day, you can handle that. For a second, I thought he was joking. Serve him. I repeated, my voice catching. Like as in hand him his food? He raised an eyebrow. Yes, what's the problem with that? That's how families work. Your mother used to serve me dinner. You'll do the same for your brother. You've got to learn respect. The word respect hit like a slap. All my life, it had been twisted into something ugly in this house. Something that meant silence, obedience, and walking on eggshells. I stared at him, then at Matt, who looked way too entertained. Something in me cracked. No, I said quietly. Dad tilted his head. What did you just say? I said no. He's a grown man, Dad. He can serve himself. The room went so quiet I could hear the old refrigerator humming. My mom froze near the doorway, holding a glass of water that suddenly seemed too heavy for her hands. Dad's face changed, like a storm cloud rolling in. His eyes narrowed, and I saw the shift from anger to pure rage. Excuse me, he said, his voice low but dangerous. I swallowed hard but didn't back down. I'm not doing it anymore. I'm tired of being treated like a maid. Matt snorted. Wow. Look at Little Miss Independent. That was it. The spark that lit the fuse. Dad stood up so fast the recliner creaked. His hand hit the side of the chair, and before I could even react, he was towering over me. You don't talk to me like that in my house, he shouted, his face inches from mine. You don't get to refuse me. I stood too, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear him anymore. I'm not your servant. I snapped, surprising even myself. Then it happened, so fast I didn't have time to think. His hand came down hard across my face. The sound echoed in the room. I stumbled, my vision blurring. The taste of metal filled my mouth. My mother gasped softly but didn't move. Matt just sat there, silent now, his smirk gone. I wanted to believe he'd step in, But he didn't. He just watched. I pressed my hand to my cheek, the sting growing sharper with each breath. See what you made me do? Dad growled. You pushed me to this. You never learn. I looked up at him through tears I didn't even feel yet. No, Dad, I whispered. You just proved what I already knew. He didn't like that. His hand came down again, this time grabbing my arm, shaking me so hard I thought my shoulder might pop. You don't talk back to me. My mother finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Tom, stop. But he didn't stop. Not right away. When he finally let go, I fell against the wall, my knees giving out. My breath came in short bursts, and I remember thinking, not about the pain, but about how small I felt. Like I'd disappeared completely. No one moved to help me. Not Mom. Not Matt. Just the sound of the clock ticking above the TV. I got up slowly, holding the wall for balance. My voice was hoarse when I said it, but I made sure he heard me clearly. You'll never hit me again. He laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. You're not going anywhere, Nova. You wouldn't last a week on your own. Maybe once he would have been right. But not that night. That night, I saw the truth for the first time. It wasn't just about the slap or the bruises that would bloom by morning. It was about the control. The way they'd all learned to live under his anger like it was normal weather. I walked to my room without looking back. I locked the door, sat on the floor, and tried to breathe through the shaking. My face throbbed, my hands trembled, and my reflection in the mirror barely looked human. I thought about every chore I'd done without thanks, every word I'd swallowed to keep peace, every time I'd told myself he'd change. And that's when it hit me, he never would. Down the hall, I heard them talking. My mom's voice low, pleading. His booming. Matt's laughter cutting through it all. That sound sealed it for me. I pulled out my old duffel bag and started folding clothes. Not to leave yet, but to remind myself that one day I would. That night I didn't cry. I couldn't. I just sat there, wide awake, staring at the bruise spreading across my cheek in the reflection of my phone screen. And quietly, under my breath, I promised myself, this won't be the end of my story, because something inside me had shifted. The girl who used to stay silent at every family meeting had finally found her voice. And once it came out, there was no taking it back. That was the night everything changed. The night my family saw me break, but had no idea they'd just created someone stronger than they ever expected. When morning came, I was still sitting on the floor, my back against the wall, the duffel bag half-zipped beside me. The house was quiet, but not peaceful, just hollow. That kind of silence that comes after a storm when you know everything looks calm, but the air still smells like thunder. My face ached when I tried to move my jaw. I stood up slowly, went to the bathroom, and turned on the light. For a second, I couldn't look in the mirror. But when I did, I froze. The left side of my cheek had turned a deep shade of purple. My lip was split, barely noticeable but still sore. I splashed some cold water on my skin, hoping it might numb the sting. It didn't. I stared at my reflection for a long time. Long enough to realize I wasn't just looking at bruises. I was looking at every silent moment I'd accepted over the years. Every insult brushed off. Every apology I'd whispered to keep things calm. This was all of it, written in color across my skin. From down the hall, I heard the sound of coffee cups clinking and my father's voice talking about the news, like nothing had happened. My mother moved around the kitchen quietly. I could tell by her steps she was trying not to draw attention to herself. I took a deep breath and opened the bathroom door. The smell of bacon hit me first, mixed with the faint aroma of burnt toast. Mom was at the stove, wearing her faded blue robe, stirring scrambled eggs that looked more like yellow mush. She glanced at me just once, then looked away, as if eye contact might break something fragile. Morning, I said softly. My voice came out shaky. Morning, she murmured back, not turning around. I sat down at the small kitchen table. Matt was already there, tapping on his phone. He didn't even glance up. The sunlight from the window hit his face, and I remember thinking how unfair it looked. How untouched he was by everything that had happened. Dad came in a minute later, dressed for work, his boots heavy against the tile floor. He didn't look at me either. He just grabbed his travel mug, muttered something about the traffic, and walked out the door. The slam echoed through the kitchen. Mom flinched. "Do you need ice?" she asked quietly. I hesitated. "No. I'm fine." We both knew that wasn't true, but neither of us said it. Her eyes flicked toward my face for just a moment. Then, as if it burned her, she turned back to the stove. "Don't talk back to him today," she whispered. "Just keep things easy. He's under a lot of pressure." Pressure. That word again. The one that always excused everything he did. I nodded because arguing would only make her cry, and I didn't have the strength for that. Matt finally looked up, a half-smirk playing on his lips. "You gonna pout all day?" I looked at him slowly. "You sat there and watched." He shrugged. "You pushed him. You know how Dad gets when he's mad. You should have just said sorry." I wanted to throw something at him, but instead I just stood up, grabbed my coffee, and walked out to the porch. The air was cold, crisp, and felt cleaner than anything inside that house. I sat on the steps, holding my mug close, trying to let the warmth calm me down. Across the street, the neighbors were starting their day. Mrs. Turner was walking her dog, waving to the mailman. Normal life. Ordinary people. No bruises they had to hide. I pulled the sleeve of my sweatshirt over my hand and pressed it gently to my cheek. The pressure made me wince. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Maybe because I knew crying would change nothing. Inside, I heard the clatter of dishes, Matt probably dumping his plate in the sink for me to clean. Even now, after everything, they still expected me to play my part. I went back in a little later. My mother was sitting at the table, sipping tea, her eyes red. She looked up at me and tried to smile. "You should eat something," she said softly. "I'm not hungry." "You'll feel better if you do." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, and for a moment, I saw something break in her expression. I wanted to ask her why she stayed, why she never stood up for me, but I already knew her answer. She was too afraid to start over. Fear had become her safety blanket. I spent most of the day cleaning, partly because it was routine, partly because it gave me something to control. I vacuumed, wiped counters, folded laundry that wasn't mine. Anything to keep my mind busy. Around noon, the doorbell rang. I jumped. My heart raced before I even realized who it might be. It was Lisa, my co-worker from the diner. She'd stopped by to drop off some leftover pie from last night's shift. She smiled politely, but her eyes caught the bruise instantly. "Oh, Nova," she said softly, her voice lowering. "What happened?" I froze. My instinct was to lie. That's what I'd always done. "I slipped in the kitchen," I muttered. Lisa's eyes narrowed. She didn't believe me, but she didn't push either. "Kitchen floors can be tricky," she said gently. Then she added, "If you ever need to talk, I'm around, okay?" I nodded, clutching the pie tin. "Thanks." When she left, I closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling shakily. It was strange how kindness could hurt almost as much as cruelty. It reminded you of what you were missing. By evening, the tension in the house had settled into its usual routine. Dad came home tired and silent. Mom reheated leftovers. Matt complained about the Wi-Fi. The world kept spinning like nothing had happened. After dinner, I went to my room and locked the door again. The bruise had started to darken, turning a deep blue at the edges. I dabbed concealer over it, not because I cared about how I looked, but because I couldn't stand seeing it. As I sat on the edge of my bed, my mom knocked softly. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, then opened the door. She stepped inside, holding a folded towel filled with ice cubes. She handed it to me without a word. "Thank you," I whispered. She sat on the edge of the bed beside me. "He didn't mean to go that far," she said after a moment. I let out a short, bitter laugh. "You really believe that?" Her shoulders sagged. "He's not a bad man, Nova. He's just tired. Things have been hard since you left school." There it was, the guilt card. The reminder that somehow, all of this was my fault. I looked at her, trying to find the mother I used to know. The one who brushed my hair when I was little, who hummed songs while making pancakes. But all I saw now was fear. Fear wearing love like a disguise. "Mom," I said quietly, "if I ever left, would you come with me?" She blinked, startled. "Leave? Don't talk like that." "I mean it," I pressed. "Would you?" She looked down at her hands. You don't just walk away from family. I nodded slowly, feeling that familiar ache in my chest. Maybe you don't. But I might have to. She stood up quickly, almost panicked. Just get some rest. Things will be better tomorrow. When she left, I sat there staring at the closed door, the air heavy with everything unsaid. That night, as I lay in bed, the bruise throbbed in rhythm with my heartbeat. Every pulse was a reminder, not just of the pain, but of the silence that surrounded it. And then something unexpected happened. Matt knocked on my door. I hesitated. What? He pushed the door open halfway, leaning on the frame. You made Dad real mad last night, he said. Yeah, I noticed. He shifted awkwardly, scratching the back of his neck. Look, I didn't think he'd actually, you know. I looked at him sharply. You didn't stop him either. He didn't argue. He's just old school, Nova. You know how he is. Old school doesn't mean violent, I said, my voice firmer than I expected. Matt sighed. Whatever. Just don't start another fight, okay? You'll make things worse. He left before I could answer. I sat there staring at the door, realizing that even when he tried to sound like he cared, it was still about keeping the peace. For Dad, not for me. As the night dragged on, I lay awake listening to the creaks of the old house. Every sound felt heavier now, loaded with meaning. The pipes groaned, the heater clicked, and I thought about how every object in this place seemed to know our secrets. In the dark, I touched my cheek again. It wasn't just a bruise anymore. It was a reminder of how invisible I'd become in my own family. But as I stared at the ceiling, I also realized something new, something small but fierce. If no one else wanted to see the bruises, I would. I'd see them, remember them, and let them push me toward something better. Because pretending everything was fine had done nothing but keep me trapped. That night, for the first time, I whispered the truth to myself. I deserve better than this. It didn't fix anything. The bruise didn't fade. But saying it out loud made it real. And that was the first step toward something different. Something I wasn't ready to name yet, but could finally start to feel. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. The bruise on my cheek had started to fade into an ugly yellow, but it still hurt when I smiled. Not that there was much to smile about. The house was quiet again, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock in the hallway. It was strange how normal mornings could look even after nights like that. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the faint light sneaking through the curtains. My throat was dry, my chest heavy. The words I'd whispered the night before, I deserve better than this, still echoed in my head. I hadn't planned on doing anything about them. Not yet. I didn't even know where I'd go or how. But something inside me had shifted, quietly and deeply. It wasn't courage exactly. More like exhaustion. The kind that makes you realize staying is harder than leaving. I got dressed in jeans and an old sweater, tied my hair into a low bun, and slipped on my sneakers. Downstairs, the air smelled faintly of coffee and detergent. My mother was already in the kitchen, humming softly, her robe pulled tight around her waist. When she saw me, she blinked like she wasn't expecting me up this early. You're awake, she said softly. Couldn't sleep, I replied. She nodded and handed me a cup. The mug was chipped on one side, the same one I'd used since high school. I held it carefully, as if it might shatter under the weight of my thoughts. After a long silence, she said, Your father's working late tonight. Maybe things will be calm. Calm. That word again. Always used like a peace treaty, but it never meant peace. It meant silence. I was thinking, I said slowly, I might look for a second job. She glanced up. You already work at the diner. I know, but maybe something during the day. Save a little money. Her hands froze midair. For what? I shrugged, pretending to sip my coffee, just to have something of my own. She didn't press. She just nodded, but I could see the worry behind her eyes. After breakfast, I grabbed my coat and walked toward the diner. The air outside was cool and sharp, carrying that faint smell of wet pavement after the early morning drizzle. My sneakers splashed lightly in puddles as I made my way down the familiar streets. The diner's neon sign flickered in red and white, half the letters still broken. Inside, it smelled of bacon grease, coffee, and nostalgia. Lisa waved from behind the counter. Hey, early bird, she said with a grin. Couldn't sleep again? I smiled faintly. Something like that. She poured me a coffee before I could even ask. You okay? I hesitated. Yeah. Just thinking about making some changes. Lisa raised an eyebrow. Good changes, I hope. Hopefully. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. You know, my cousin's hiring over at the flower shop on Maple. Not much pay, but it's quiet work. Peaceful. You'd like it. A flower shop. It sounded small and simple, but peaceful? That word felt like a dream. Could you give me the number? I asked. Lisa smiled. Already wrote it down. She slid a piece of paper across the counter, like she'd been waiting for me to ask. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of orders, spilled coffee, and small talk. But under it all, something new was forming, like an outline of a plan I hadn't meant to draw. That evening, I walked to Maple Street. The flower shop sat between an antique bookstore and a tailor's shop. Its front window was filled with soft pink tulips, tiny succulents, and lavender bundles tied with white ribbon. The sign above the door read Evergreen Blooms. I stood outside for a moment, just watching. Inside, a middle-aged woman was arranging sunflowers in a vase. She looked peaceful, her movements calm, deliberate. Finally, I opened the door. A soft bell chimed above me. The woman looked up and smiled. Hello, dear. Can I help you? Hi, I said, my voice a little shaky. My friend said you might be hiring. She wiped her hands on her apron and nodded. You must be Lisa's friend. She called this morning. I'm Clara. I blinked, surprised. Lisa had called already? Yes, that's me. Nova, I said, extending my hand. Clara's grip was warm. You have experience with flowers? Not really, I admitted. But I'm a fast learner. Well, she said, studying me for a moment. I believe anyone who's gentle with people can be gentle with flowers too. Her words made something in me soften. She handed me a small clipboard. Can you start tomorrow? Just part-time for now. Mornings mostly. I nodded quickly. Yes, absolutely. As I left the shop, I realized I was smiling, genuinely, not out of habit. I hadn't planned on this job, or on the quiet spark of hope it gave me. But it felt like a step, even if I didn't yet know where it was leading. That night, I told Mom about it while we were folding laundry in the living room. A flower shop? She said, surprised. It's just part-time. Mornings only. She folded a towel neatly, aligning the corners. Your father might not like that. He doesn't need to know. Not yet. Her hands paused mid-fold. Nova. I'm not doing anything wrong, I said gently. It's just work. She didn't answer, but her silence said enough. Fear had been in this house for so long. It had turned into routine. The next morning, I arrived early at Evergreen Blooms. Clara greeted me with a warm smile and handed me a pair of gloves. Let's start with something simple, she said. Roses need trimming before we set them out. The scent of flowers filled the air, fresh, earthy, alive. I trimmed stems, arranged bouquets, wrapped them in paper that crinkled softly between my fingers. The work was quiet, almost meditative. For the first time in a long while, my hands weren't shaking. During lunch, Clara brought out a small sandwich and shared stories about her late husband, her daughter who moved to another city, and how she'd opened the shop 10 years ago to fill the silence in her life. I thought I was too old to start over, she said, smiling wistfully. Turns out, peace is something you can build at any age. Her words stayed with me long after my shift ended. That evening, when I got home, the living room was empty. Dad's boots were by the door, his jacket slung carelessly over a chair. He was home early. My heart thudded in my chest. Where were you? His voice came from the kitchen, sharp, suspicious. At work, I said carefully. At which work? I hesitated. The diner. He narrowed his eyes. I called. You weren't there. I felt the air tighten around me. I just picked up some extra hours helping a friend, I said softly. He stepped closer. You lying to me now? My mother appeared from behind him, her face pale. She's just helping out, Thomas. It's nothing. He glared at her, then at me. We'll talk about this later. He stormed off, leaving a trail of tension behind him. I could hear the sound of the TV turning on, louder than usual, his way of reminding us who controlled the noise. Mom looked at me helplessly. Why couldn't you just tell him the truth? Because he'd never let me go, I whispered. That night, I sat by the window, watching the streetlights flicker. My heart still raced from earlier, but under the fear, there was something else, determination. I thought about Clara's shop, the smell of roses, the sound of scissors snipping through stems. For the first time, I felt like I was building something, slowly, quietly, like planting seeds in hard soil. The plan I never knew I had wasn't about running away. Not yet. It was about finding small pieces of freedom and collecting them, day by day, until they were enough to build a life. Every paycheck, I tucked away a few dollars into a tin box I hid behind my dresser. Every morning, I left early, pretending I had extra shifts at the diner. Every evening, I wrote down what I'd learned, how to trim stems, how to wrap a bouquet, how to choose flowers that lasted longer in heat. It wasn't just about flowers. It was about learning control again. Weeks passed, and the bruises faded. My cheek healed, but I still felt their memory when I looked in the mirror. Each time I saw that faint yellow trace, I whispered the same promise to myself. Keep going. Then one evening, Clara handed me an envelope. You've been working hard, she said with a smile. A little bonus for the effort. I opened it and froze. Inside was more money than I'd expected. Enough to add a real dent to my secret savings. Thank you, I whispered. She patted my shoulder. I don't know what you're running from, dear, but whatever it is, you're doing the right thing by moving forward. I didn't answer, but my throat tightened. That night, as I counted the money and slipped it into the tin box, I realized something. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was the start of a plan I'd been building without even realizing it. I didn't know where it would lead. I didn't know when I'd have the courage to follow it fully. But for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for life to happen to me. I was quietly, carefully, shaping it myself. And even if no one else saw it, not my father, not my brother, not even my mother, I knew this truth deep inside. The plan I never knew I had was already in motion. And it had begun the moment I decided I deserved better. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm. The pale light of dawn filtered through the thin curtains, brushing across my face. For a moment, I didn't move. I just lay there, listening to the quiet hum of the world outside. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. A car door shut. The sound of life going on, even when mine still felt like it was stuck between two versions of myself. I reached under my bed and pulled out the tin box. The one that had slowly filled with crumpled bills and folded notes over the past few months. I counted the money again, carefully smoothing each bill. It wasn't much, but it was something. Something that belonged to me. Something I had built quietly, without permission, without fear. Every dollar represented another inch between who I used to be, the girl who flinched at her father's footsteps, and who I was becoming. A woman quietly building her way out. But the distance wasn't just about money. It was in the way I carried myself now, in how I breathed when I walked through the house, in how I spoke to my mother with more calm than apology. It was subtle, but real. That morning at Evergreen Blooms, the air smelled of rain and fresh-cut lilies. Clara was humming as she unpacked a new shipment of flowers. When she saw me walk in, she smiled. "Morning, sunshine. You're early again." "I like being here before the day starts," I said, tying on my apron. She chuckled. "You like the peace before the world wakes up, don't you?" I smiled faintly. "Yeah, something like that." We worked quietly for a while, trimming stems, arranging vases, labeling tags. At one point, a young couple came in, maybe in their 20s, laughing softly as they picked out a bouquet. The woman's hand rested gently on the man's arm as they talked. I found myself watching them a little too long. There was no fear in her body, no hesitation in her smile. It looked so effortless, that kind of peace between two people. Clara noticed my stare and said gently, "You see a lot of stories in people's faces when they buy flowers. Birthdays, apologies, love stories, goodbyes. Everyone's carrying something." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I guess they are." After the couple left, I wiped down the counter and thought about what Clara said. Everyone's carrying something, but not everyone's allowed to show it. For years I'd carried fear, guilt, shame, and silence, like invisible bruises I couldn't cover with makeup. And now, every day I stepped into that shop, I felt them fade just a little more. By the end of the day, I smelled like roses and eucalyptus. My fingers were sore from trimming, but it was the kind of tired that felt good. The kind that comes from building something real. On my way home, I stopped by the diner to grab a coffee to go. Lisa was behind the counter, wiping down tables. "Hey, stranger," she said with a grin. "You've been glowing lately. What's up?" I laughed softly. "Maybe it's just the flower shop. Everything smells nice there." She raised an eyebrow. "Or maybe it's because you're finally doing something for yourself." Her words hit deeper than she probably meant them to. I didn't say anything, just smiled and thanked her for the coffee. When I got home, the house was quiet again. Mom was folding laundry in the living room, her face tired but calm. Dad wasn't home yet, and I could breathe without measuring my volume. "Hey," I said softly, placing my coffee on the table. "Want some help?" She looked up and smiled faintly. "Sure." We folded towels together in silence for a while, the sound of fabric rustling between us. Then she said, "You seem happier lately." I paused mid-fold. "Do I?" She nodded. "There's something different in your eyes. Like you're not waiting for the next storm." I swallowed hard. "I guess I'm just tired of living in fear." Her hands trembled slightly. "I used to think fear kept us safe," she whispered. "But now I'm not so sure." That night, after dinner, I sat by my window again. The streetlight outside flickered like it always did, casting long shadows across my room. I thought about how many nights I'd sat here before, crying quietly, wishing for escape. Now I wasn't wishing anymore. I was planning, even if I didn't realize it before. The next week brought something unexpected. Clara offered me a full-time position. "You've got a gift with arrangements," she said, smiling. "And customers love you. I'd like to keep you here more, if you're up for it." I froze, my heart fluttering. Full-time meant more hours, more pay, more distance. "I'd love that," I said quickly, trying to hide the tears threatening to surface. Clara beamed. "Then it's settled. Starting Monday." That night I wrote in my notebook, a habit I'd started a few weeks ago. I wrote down what I'd earned, what I'd saved, and a list of small goals. Open my own bank account. Find a place to rent, even a room. Learn to drive again. Each line felt like a quiet rebellion written in ink. But with every small victory came tension. My father had started to notice the changes. The way I spoke without stuttering, the way I moved without waiting for permission. One evening he asked abruptly, "You've been coming home late. What are you really doing?" I forced a calm smile. "I've been working extra shifts, trying to help out." He narrowed his eyes. "You think you're better than the rest of us now? With your little job?" The room went still. Mom looked at me with silent warning in her eyes. But something in me had changed. I wasn't the same girl who apologized for existing. "I don't think I'm better," I said evenly. "I'm just trying to build something for myself." He stared at me, his jaw tightening, but he didn't say another word. Just turned the TV louder, like he always did when he lost control. That night I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just sat in my room, breathing slowly, realizing I'd crossed another invisible line. One that separated who I was from who I was becoming. The next morning, Clara introduced me to a delivery driver named Jonah. He was around my age, maybe late 20s, with kind eyes and a calm presence. He helped load boxes into the truck, cracking jokes that actually made me laugh. It felt strange, that easy laughter. Like I was remembering how to be human again. Over the next few weeks, Jonah and I worked side by side, delivering flowers across town. He'd tell stories about his sister's kids, his love for hiking, his dream of opening a small coffee shop one day. And though I didn't say much at first, I found myself opening up, little by little. He never asked about my family, but one afternoon, while we were delivering a bouquet to a nursing home, he said quietly, "You've got this quiet strength about you. Like you've been through storms but still choose to stand." I looked away, blinking back sudden emotion. Maybe that's the only choice some people get. He nodded. "Yeah, but not everyone makes it through." You should be proud of that. Later that night, I thought about his words. Proud. I'd never used that word for myself before. It felt strange, almost foreign. But also right. Weeks turned into months, and the shop became my second home. Clara treated me like family. Jonah became a friend I could trust, and my savings grew steadily. But more than the money, I was collecting pieces of myself, confidence, peace, purpose. I started taking evening walks after work, just to breathe. The world felt bigger now, like I was finally allowed to exist in it. The distance between the girl who once begged for her father's approval and the woman I was becoming stretched wider with each step I took. One evening, as I walked past a small park, I saw a father teaching his little girl how to ride a bike. She fell once, twice, and each time he helped her back up, laughing. It was such a simple, ordinary moment, but it hit me deeply. That's what love was supposed to look like. Safe, patient, kind. I sat on a nearby bench, watching them until the sun dipped below the trees. For the first time, I didn't feel anger or bitterness, just acceptance. My father would never be that man. And that was okay, because I was no longer the girl who needed him to be. That night, I opened my notebook again. On the last page, I wrote one sentence. I'm not who I was. And I don't ever want to be again. As I closed the book, I realized something powerful. Healing didn't look like revenge or loud confrontations. It looked like distance, the quiet, steady kind that grows between pain and peace. And maybe that was the truest form of freedom I'd ever know. The first time I saw my father after all those years, the world felt smaller, quieter, as if it was holding its breath. The winter wind brushed across my face, and for a second, I wasn't sure if I was ready. The girl who once trembled under his voice was long gone. But a part of me still remembered that night, the shouting, the pain, and the silence that followed me like a shadow. I hadn't planned to see him again. Life had given me other plans, ones that pulled me far from that house, far from the bruises no one wanted to see. But fate has its way of folding old stories back into your lap when you least expect it. It started with a call from my brother, Ethan. Nova, you should come home, he said, his voice heavier than I'd ever heard. Dad's not doing well. I froze, my heart skipping like it had hit a crack in the road. Why are you calling me now, Ethan? I asked quietly. After everything? He sighed. Because he asked for you. Those 5 words cut through me like a whisper through glass. My father, the man who never saw my pain, who told me to know my place, who turned our home into a stage for my humiliation, wanted to see me. I didn't answer that night. I sat on the edge of my bed, looking out the window at the city lights below, my mind looping memories like an old film reel. The fear, the anger, the long drive away from home, swearing I'd never go back. But life has a cruel sense of irony. Sometimes, the only way to prove you've healed is to stand again where you were once broken. So I packed a small bag. Not because I forgave him, not yet, but because I needed closure. Not for him. For me. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The paint was peeling, the garden overgrown, and the porch light flickered weakly like it, too, was tired of waiting. Ethan opened the door before I could knock. He looked surprised, maybe even relieved. Nova, he said softly. Hey, I replied, forcing a smile. So he's inside. He nodded. In his room. He's been asking for you. The words felt heavy, like they were meant for someone else. I stepped inside, and the smell of old furniture and faded memories hit me. Every corner of that house carried a ghost. The kitchen table where I was scolded for speaking up, the hallway where I'd cried silently, the living room where my father's voice had been louder than thunder. My steps slowed as I reached his room. The door was slightly open, and inside I could see him, smaller, frilier, sitting in a chair by the window. Time had carved deep lines across his face, and his once commanding presence was gone, replaced by something I didn't recognize. He turned his head slowly. Nova. The sound of my name from his lips almost broke me. It's me, I said quietly. For a moment, he just looked at me, his eyes searching, trembling. Then, with a shaky breath, he whispered, You grew up. I nodded. Yeah. Life kind of forces you to. There was silence. Heavy. Awkward. Real. He tried to smile, but it faltered halfway. I didn't think you'd come. I didn't think I would either. He looked down at his hands, thin and pale. I've had a lot of time to think, Nova. About that night. About what I did. I swallowed hard. I wanted to scream, to ask why he hurt me, why he let Ethan treat me like a maid, why he never looked back when I walked out that door. But I just stood there, quiet, the storm inside me spinning. You don't have to say anything, he said weakly. I just needed to see you. Once. Why? I asked, my voice breaking for the first time. Why now? After all this time? He hesitated. Because I don't want to leave this world without facing what I did to you. The words caught me off guard. I didn't expect remorse. Not from him. He gestured for me to sit. I did slowly. I was wrong, he said. I thought being hard on you would make you stronger. I thought I was teaching you respect, discipline. But I was just repeating what was done to me. And it ruined everything. His voice cracked, a sound I had never heard from him. The man who once barked orders now spoke in a whisper, trembling with something close to regret. I don't need your apology, I said quietly. I just needed you to see what you broke. He looked up, eyes glistening. I see it now. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel powerless. The room that once felt like a prison now felt like a stage, and I was finally the one in control. I took a slow breath. I used to think forgiveness was weakness. But it's not. It's choosing peace over poison. I forgive you not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. His shoulders trembled. Thank you. I stood, tears blurring my vision. Goodbye, Dad. But before I could turn, he grabbed my hand, weakly, but enough to stop me. Nova. I'm proud of you, he whispered. The words hit me like a wave. I didn't need them. I didn't even think I wanted them. But hearing them, after all those years of silence, made something deep inside me finally exhale. That night, I stayed in my old room. The wallpaper was faded, the mirror cracked, but it felt less haunted than I remembered. I looked at myself in that mirror, older, wiser, freer, and realized something. I had become everything I needed, despite everything I lacked. The next morning, Ethan came by with coffee. He barely slept, he said softly. He kept saying your name. I nodded. Maybe that's his way of letting go. Ethan hesitated. You're really different now, Nova. Stronger. I had to be, I said. You learn to rebuild when no one else will do it for you. We sat in silence for a while, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel anger toward him either. He was part of that broken house, that broken family, but he too was trying to change. When I finally left, I didn't look back. The house disappeared in my rearview mirror, but for the first time, it didn't hurt to see it fade. Months later, I got a letter. It was short, written in shaky handwriting. Nova, thank you for coming home. I'm sorry for every bruise, every word, every silence. I hope one day, you'll think of me not as the man who hurt you, but as the man who tried too late to understand. Dad. I folded the letter and placed it in my drawer. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just felt free. Life moved forward. I started volunteering at a women's shelter. Women who, like me, carried invisible scars. I told them my story not for pity, but to remind them that survival isn't just about escaping. It's about reclaiming yourself. One evening after giving a talk, a young woman approached me. You're so brave, she said. How did you ever find the strength to forgive? I smiled softly, because I stopped waiting for an apology to start healing. A year later, Ethan called again. He's gone, he said quietly. I closed my eyes. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel joy. Just peace, like a chapter had closed gently instead of slamming shut. After the funeral, I stood by his grave, the sky turning gold above me. You saw me again, Dad, I whispered. But this time, I saw myself too. The wind brushed my hair, soft and cold, like an unseen hand saying goodbye. As I walked away, I realized forgiveness hadn't made me weaker. It had set me free. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. I was the woman who survived her own story and rewrote the ending.